This message was not meant to comfort you in the way you hoped. You arrived here searching for a sign that they would return, that the waiting would end in reunion, that the love you have been carrying like a stone in your chest would finally be received and returned in full. The universe heard that prayer, and it answered, only not in the way your longing expected. Sometimes the cosmos does not send confirmation. Sometimes it sends clarity. And clarity, as Carl Jung once wrote, is the most uncomfortable gift the psyche can receive, because it demands not patience, but courage, the courage to see what has always been true, even when the heart has been looking away. This is one of those messages, the kind that lands differently, the kind that asks something of you rather than simply soothing you. You have been strong enough to wait. The question this transmission carries is whether you are strong enough to hear something else entirely. Something the deepest part of your soul has already whispered to you in the silence between thoughts, in the hollow hours before sunrise, when the mind finally stops its bargaining, and something ancient and knowing speaks instead. The universe does not always say wait longer. Sometimes, in the stillness beneath all that hoping, it says something far more transformative. It says, you are complete here. It says, the lesson has been delivered. It says, you are free now, if only you will accept that freedom rather than mistake it for abandonment. This is not the message of failure. This is the message of completion. There is a profound and sacred difference between these two, and you are being invited today to understand that difference in your body, in your spirit, and in the choices that await you on the other side of this transmission. If you can receive truth today, not comfort, but truth, write the words, I am ready to hear truth in the comments below. Let that declaration be the first act of the new beginning that is already forming around you. There is a distinction. The modern understanding of love has collapsed into a single desperate hope, and that collapse has caused more suffering than almost any other confusion the human heart carries. The distinction is this: not every soul that ignites something profound within you is meant to remain beside you. Not every connection that feels fated is, in fact, a destination. Some are doorways. Some are storms. Some are the precise kind of disruption the psyche requires in order to shed the version of itself that could no longer serve the path ahead. Carl Jung understood this with extraordinary depth. He wrote of the meeting between two personalities as being like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Transformation, not permanence, is the operative word. The soul teacher does not arrive to build a home with you. They arrive to dissolve the walls of the home you had built around your limitations, your wounds, your inherited beliefs about what you deserve and what love is allowed to look like. The soulmate, and here the word is used not as a romantic ideal, but as a spiritual reality, is the one who stands with you after the earthquake. The soul teacher is the earthquake itself. They are the force that cracks the ground open so that something buried beneath years of unconscious patterns can finally surface, finally breathe, finally be seen and integrated. Their arrival in your life was not an accident. Their intensity was not random. The collective unconscious, that vast and invisible field that Carl Jung described as the shared psychic inheritance of all humanity, arranged this encounter with precise and purposeful intention. But the intention was never that they would stay. The intention was that you would be changed. And you were. You are not the same person you were before this connection entered your life. The values you now hold, the boundaries you now know you require, the depth of love you now understand yourself to be capable of, all of this was excavated by the very relationship that is causing you pain today. They were not your foundation. They were the seismic event that revealed you needed a stronger one. And the universe, in its unyielding wisdom, does not send the architect while the rubble is still settling. Before you can walk forward freely, there is sacred work to be done within the ground of this very relationship. Not the work of analyzing what went wrong, not the work of rehearsing what you should have said differently, but the work of receiving what was given, even when it was given in the form of pain, even when the curriculum was delivered through disappointment, silence, or the slow erosion of hope. Because they taught you. This is the truth that transforms everything once it is genuinely received. They showed you the precise dimensions of your strength by testing those dimensions in ways that nothing comfortable ever could. Every moment you endured uncertainty and did not collapse. Every night you survived the silence and rose again the following morning. These were not simply episodes of suffering. These were demonstrations of a resilience you did not fully know you possessed until this person required you to locate it. They taught you your own boundaries by crossing them. This is one of the most profound and paradoxical gifts a soul teacher carries. Before this person, your limits lived in the abstract, as ideas, as preferences, as quiet hopes that others might simply sense and honor without being told. This person did not honor them. And in that violation, however painful, you were forced into a new relationship with yourself, one in which you had to name what you would and would not accept, had to stand in that naming even when it trembled, had to discover that a boundary held, even imperfectly, is a form of self-love. They revealed the architecture of your worth by undervaluing it. When someone fails to recognize what you carry, and you are forced to sit within that failure without immediately abandoning yourself in order to be chosen, something in the soul calcifies into dignity. You learned, through the cold school of this connection, that your value does not diminish because it goes unrecognized. That is a lesson no comfortable love could have delivered with such precision. The relationship you have been grieving was a curriculum designed specifically for your evolution. Every chapter of it, the hope, the confusion, the longing, the slow and aching acceptance, was part of a spiritual program the universe enrolled you in, not to punish you, but to prepare you. And the highest honor you can offer to that curriculum now is not to repeat the course indefinitely, but to graduate, carrying everything it gave you, and nothing that was never truly yours to keep. There is a cruelty in the way the mind frames this, the endless loop of asking why they will not choose you, why they will not rise to what this connection could be, why they continue to fall short of the vision you hold for what love between two people is capable of becoming. But the cruelty is not in them. And it is not in you. The cruelty is in the framing itself, because it is the wrong question entirely. It is not that they will not. It is that they cannot. And that distinction, though it may feel like a small linguistic shift, is one of the most liberating recognitions available to the human heart. Willingness implies choice. Capacity implies the presence or absence of something foundational. Something that cannot simply be summoned by intention or desire or even by love, however sincere that love may be. People can only meet you at the depth they have accessed within themselves. This is not a judgment. It is not a condemnation of who they are. It is simply the honest acknowledgement of a spiritual law that operates regardless of how much either party wishes otherwise, that a person who has not yet done the interior work of the shadow self, who has not yet descended into the depths of their own unexamined patterns and unconscious wounds, cannot offer you a love built on that depth. They can offer what they have, and what they have is not, at this moment in their journey, what you require. You have been engaged in a form of invisible labor, the labor of expanding yourself, healing your patterns, confronting the parts of your shadow self that this relationship brought so urgently to the surface. That labor changes a person. It deepens them. And depth, once achieved, cannot be unachieved. You have grown into a version of yourself that this dynamic can no longer fully hold or honor. You have not failed to love them correctly. You have not missed some crucial opportunity to unlock what they were meant to give you. You have simply outgrown the container of this connection. And a soul that has outgrown its container is not broken. It is expanding. It is becoming. It is asking you, through the pressure of that outgrowth, to find a larger space in which to continue its becoming. Of all the places the heart can become imprisoned, perhaps none is more elegant or more devastating than the architecture of potential. The shimmering, ever-receding version of a person that lives not in reality, but in the imagination, constructed from glimpses and moments, and the rare afternoon when they were almost exactly who you needed them to be. When the light caught them at an angle that confirmed everything you had been hoping was true. You fell in love with who they could become. This is not a failure of judgment. It is, in many ways, evidence of the extraordinary depth of your own capacity for vision. You could see in them what they could not yet see in themselves. You perceive the soul beneath the wound, the potential beneath the pattern, the fully realized version of this person that might exist if they chose the work, if the conditions aligned, if something inside them finally turned toward the light in which you held them. And that perception was real. That potential was not a fiction you invented. It existed. But potential that is perceived and never chosen by the one who carries it is not a promise. It is a portrait. And you cannot build a life beside a portrait. You cannot be held by a portrait in the darkness. You cannot build the sacred architecture of a shared future with someone who remains, despite everything, the unrealized version of themselves. You cannot love someone into an evolution they have not chosen for themselves. This law operates without exception and without sentiment. Love is not the catalyst for another person's transformation. Their own will is. And when that will has not yet turned, when the soul teacher has not yet become a student of their own depths, then the love you pour into that space does not accelerate their becoming. It simply sustains the comfortable stasis in which they remain unrequired to grow. If you are finally ready to stop building your peace upon the uncertain ground of someone else's potential, if you are ready to be loved for who you already are rather than sustained by the hope of who they might eventually become, then let this transmission mark that turning point. Subscribe and walk this path of reclamation, because what comes next belongs to you entirely. Every choice carries within it a concealed arithmetic, a ledger that the conscious mind rarely examines because the heart, in its attachment, does not wish to know the full sum. But the universe is patient and precise, and it keeps that ledger whether or not you choose to look at it. And the accounting of staying, of remaining in a connection that has completed its purpose, of continuing to pour your energy into a vessel that cannot hold what you are offering. This accounting is one that the soul eventually demands be read aloud. Every day spent waiting for someone to become what they have demonstrated they cannot currently be is a day not spent moving toward what is already prepared for you. The beloved who will not require you to translate yourself, who will not ask you to minimize your needs in order to remain palatable, who will not leave you analyzing the temperature of their silence. That person exists in your future. But futures are not passive. They are magnetized by present choices. And a present choice to remain in incompletion is simultaneously a choice to delay arrival. There is an energetic cost to the unfulfilled connection that is rarely spoken of in the language of spiritual guidance, and yet it is one of the most tangible and measurable drains a human being can experience. To hold space for a connection that does not reciprocate is to keep a door open through which warmth continuously escapes. The energy that flows outward toward someone who cannot receive it, the prayer, the hope, the midnight thought, the restrained need, all of this is real energy departing a real body, leaving behind a subtle but accumulating depletion that colors everything else in the life it inhabits. And perhaps most profound of all is the cost that falls beneath the other's invisibility, but surpasses them all in weight, the cost of self-betrayal. Each moment you accept less than what you know at the level of the soul that you deserve, you send a message inward to the deepest architecture of your sense of self that says your worth is negotiable. That message, repeated daily over months or years, does not leave without consequence. The reclamation of that self-knowledge, that bedrock certainty in your own value, begins only when the acceptance of less is finally and irrevocably withdrawn. The act of walking away has been so thoroughly misread by a culture saturated in the mythology of persistence, of love that endures all, waits all, bears all without limit, that the soul who finally turns and moves forward is more likely to condemn themselves than to recognize the profound spiritual authority contained in that movement. But walking away from what no longer serves the evolution of your soul is not an act of weakness, nor of defeat, nor of insufficient love. It is, in the deepest language of the spirit, an act of sacred alignment. The universe is not asking you to suffer indefinitely in order to demonstrate your devotion. The universe is clearing a path, and a path can only be cleared if you are willing to step off the one that has ended, to trust that the ground ahead, though not yet fully visible, is real and solid and waiting to bear your weight. Synchronicity, That principle Jung identified as the meaningful convergence of inner and outer realities does not operate in stagnant energy. It flows, and it delivers its gifts, its encounters, its extraordinary coincidences of connection, only to those in motion. The energetic law at the heart of all release is this: what you cling to cannot depart, and what you cling to, in your clinging, you also cannot fully experience. When you hold a person in the tight fist of desperate attachment, you are not loving them. You are holding a version of them frozen in the shape of your need. True release, the kind that the soul requires, loosens that fist entirely. And what happens then is one of two things, both of which are blessings in their distinct and different ways. They may, upon feeling the energetic truth of your release, the withdrawal of the anxious current that has held the dynamic in its unresolved state, find themselves moved toward genuine reflection and real transformation. Return, when it comes after authentic release, is not the same reunion that the waiting and hoping would have produced. It is something different, something earned and changed and aligned with the higher possibility of what could be built between two people who have both arrived at their own wholeness. Or they will not return, and you will discover in the weeks and months that follow your release that you are not waiting for them anymore. That the space their absence once occupied has been quietly, gradually, extraordinarily filled with your own presence, your own life, your own clarity, your own sovereign and expanding joy. Both outcomes are blessings. The universe does not deal in less. There is a moment, and those who have passed through it describe it with a consistency that suggests it is less a personal experience than a universal one, when the release becomes real. Not the release that is performed for the sake of strategy, not the letting go that is secretly a more sophisticated form of holding on, not the spiritual posture adopted in the hope that demonstrating detachment will accelerate their return. The real release, the one that moves through the body like a tide going out, taking with it the weight of all the hoping and the rehearsing and the counting of silences. In that moment, something in the energetic field of your life shifts with a completeness that cannot be manufactured and cannot be mistaken. The obsessive thought quiets. The chest, which has been carrying a pressure so constant it had become the background hum of ordinary consciousness, softens. The future, which had contracted to the single narrow question of whether or not this person would choose you, suddenly expands again into the full dimensionality of everything that is possible in a life no longer organized around waiting. The space that is created by genuine release is not an empty space. It is a generative one. Every tradition of spiritual wisdom across the breadth of human history has understood this, that the clearing of old energy is not a loss, but a preparation, that the silence after the storm is not desolation, but fertility, that the ground left by what has departed is the precise ground in which what is coming next takes its first invisible root. You will not immediately see what grows there. The nature of what is being prepared for you cannot be fully perceived from within the chapter that is closing. But it is being prepared. Someone is already being shaped by their own journey, their own lessons, their own encounters with their own soul teachers, someone who will meet you not at the level of your wounds, but at the level of your wholeness. If you are choosing yourself today, if this transmission has reached the part of you that was ready to hear it, share this message with someone who is still waiting for permission to do the same. Be the sacred interruption in someone else's story that this moment has been in yours. There is something the wounded heart believes, with a conviction so deep it functions as an unexamined law, that closure must come from the other person, that the apology must arrive before the healing can begin, that they must finally understand the depth of what occurred between you, must acknowledge the fullness of what their presence and their absence cost you, before you are permitted to set down the weight and step into your next chapter. This belief is understandable. It is also, in the most compassionate terms available, entirely without spiritual foundation. Closure is not delivered by another person. Closure is something you give yourself. It is a decision made within the interior landscape of your own consciousness, a sovereign act of self-authorization that requires nothing from the outside in order to be fully and permanently real. The person who hurt you may never understand the extent of that hurt. They may never arrive at the vocabulary for an adequate apology. They may never see you the way you deserved to be seen within the relationship. And you do not need them to. Their understanding is not the key to your freedom. Your own understanding is. The shadow self, that aspect of the psyche that Carl Jung described as the sum of everything the conscious mind refuses to acknowledge, is not healed by external validation. It is healed by the internal act of witnessing oneself clearly, compassionately, and completely. When you can look at this entire experience, the hope, the surrender, the confusion, the grief, without needing it to be different, without requiring the other person to retroactively justify your pain by finally comprehending it, you have achieved something the most perfectly delivered apology could never provide. You have achieved your own sovereignty. You do not need them to understand in order to forgive. You do not need them to change in order to leave. You do not need their blessing, their acknowledgement, or their permission to determine that your own peace is worth more than the continuation of a dynamic that has given you all it was ever capable of giving. The power to close this chapter belongs entirely and only to you. It always has. This transmission exists solely to remind you of a power that was never lost, only temporarily forgotten in the grammar of longing. Close your eyes for a moment within the reading of this. Let the words settle beneath the analytical mind into the deeper layer of knowing that has been listening all along, and allow yourself to perceive, however faintly, the outline of what is already forming on the other side of this release. Not as fantasy, not as compensation for present pain, but as genuine spiritual reality. The life that becomes available to you the moment you stop organizing your existence around the absence of someone who was never designed to be your permanence. Someone is coming who will not require you to translate your needs into a language that diminishes them. Someone is being prepared through their own journey of loss and growth and the slow excavation of their own authentic self, who will meet you not in the exhausting terrain of potential and projection, but in the grounded and luminous territory of mutual recognition. They will not make you wonder. They will not make you wait in silence for days and then offer fragments of presence as though they were gifts. They will simply see you fully, consistently, without the conditions and contractions that have made this current connection so costly to inhabit. This pain was not a punishment. It was a preparation. Everything this soul teacher drew out of you, every boundary you learned to name, every depth of love you discovered yourself capable of, every morning you chose yourself despite the ache, all of it was shaping you into the version of yourself that is ready to receive a love proportional to your actual worth. The suffering was the curriculum. The graduation is now. The only act remaining is one of quiet and dignified completion. Let the gratitude come. If it comes, the strange, bittersweet recognition that this person, by being exactly what they were rather than what you needed, gave you something no one designed to soothe you ever could have. Let that gratitude be the final note of this chapter. And then, without apology and without looking backward into the diminishing distance of what will not come with you, walk forward. Thank them in the silence of your own heart for the lesson. Then release them, not with bitterness, not with performance, but with the quiet finality of someone who has received what was given and is ready, at last, for what comes next. Your real love story is just beginning.